The philosophy of Aristotle covers a wide range of topics, from logic and metaphysics to ethics, politics, biology, and physics. Born in the year 384 before Christ, Aristotle studied at Plato's academy for 20 years, eventually developing his own philosophical system that, while inspired by his teacher, diverged in several key aspects. His approach was characterized by an attempt to understand the world through observation and empirical experience, in contrast to Plato's focus on purely abstract ideas. Aristotelian logic. Aristotle is considered the founder of formal logic, and his work in this field, especially his treatise Organon, was used as the main text on logic until the 19th century. For Aristotle, logic was a fundamental tool for knowledge, allowing one to distinguish between truth and falsehood through reasoning. His logical method was based on the syllogism, a form of deductive reasoning where, starting from two premises, one arrives at a conclusion. The Aristotelian syllogism works as follows: if both premises are true, then the conclusion must also be true. For example, in the syllogism all men are mortal and Socrates is a man, the logical conclusion is that Socrates is mortal. This type of deductive reasoning had a lasting influence on the history of Western thought, particularly in medieval scholastic philosophy and contemporary logical studies. Metaphysics, the study of being. In his work Metaphysics, Aristotle tackles one of the most complex topics of his thought, the study of being, or ontology. While Plato had postulated the existence of two worlds, the sensible world, accessible through the senses, and the world of ideas, accessible only through the intellect, Aristotle rejected this division. For Aristotle, there is only one world, the world we perceive, and all reality can be explained within it. The central concept of Aristotle's metaphysics is substance, which he defines as what exists in itself. Every substance is composed of two elements, matter and form. Matter is the substrate that makes up things, while form is what gives identity and structure to the matter. According to Aristotle, everything in the world is composed of these two dimensions, and change occurs when matter takes on a new form. To explain movement and change, Aristotle introduced his theory of the four causes: the material cause, what something is made of; the formal cause, what something is; the efficient cause, who or what made it; and the final cause, the purpose or end of something. The latter, the final cause, is crucial in Aristotle's thinking, as he believed that everything in nature has a purpose or final goal, a concept known as teleology. The ethics of virtue. Ethics is one of the most studied and discussed aspects of Aristotle's philosophy. In his work Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle defines happiness, or eudaimonia, as the ultimate goal of human life. However, unlike many modern philosophers who define happiness in terms of pleasure or personal satisfaction, Aristotle understood happiness as flourishing or living well. This flourishing is achieved through a virtuous life. For Aristotle, virtue is not simply a natural disposition but something developed through habit and practice. Virtue consists of finding the golden mean between two extremes, which are excess and deficiency. For example, courage is a virtue, but it lies between the extremes of cowardice, lack of courage, and recklessness, excessive courage. According to Aristotle, balance in our emotions and actions leads to a full and happy life. In this sense, Aristotelian ethics is a virtue-based ethics, where moral character is more important than rules or the consequences of actions. What matters is being a good person by developing the virtues that enable one to live a full life in harmony with reason. Politics and the concept of the polis. Aristotle held that human beings are, by nature, political animals, meaning that humans can only fully realize themselves within the polis or political community. In his work Politics, Aristotle analyzes the different forms of government and social structures that allow people to live together in a just and harmonious way. Aristotle studies three pure forms of government: monarchy, aristocracy, and democracy, each of which can degenerate into corrupt forms such as tyranny, oligarchy, and demagoguery, respectively. According to Aristotle, the best government is one that combines elements of all these forms and promotes the common good. In his political vision, justice is central, and the goal of the polis should be to promote a good life for its citizens. Aristotle's Politics is also notable for its critique of radical democracy, as practiced in Athens. While he valued citizen participation, Aristotle believed that extreme democracy could lead to instability and demagoguery. Instead, he favored a government where only the most virtuous and capable would have leadership roles, though he recognized the importance of the middle class as stabilizers of the political system. Natural philosophy and biology. Aristotle is often regarded as the first great biologist in history. Unlike other philosophers of his time, who focused on abstract ideas, Aristotle devoted much of his life to the observation of the natural world. In his biological works, Aristotle studied the anatomy, physiology, and behavior of numerous animals, classifying them based on their common characteristics. One of the key concepts in Aristotelian biology is the idea of souls. Aristotle believed that all living beings have a soul, though not in the religious sense of an immortal soul. For Aristotle, the soul is what gives life and movement to living beings, and there are different types of souls: the vegetative soul, which plants possess, the sensitive soul, which animals possess, and the rational soul, exclusive to human beings. This distinction between the different types of souls allowed Aristotle to develop a classification of living beings and a deeper understanding of the nature of life. His teleological theory also influenced his view of biology. Aristotle believed that all organisms have a purpose or end in nature and that each part of an organism has a specific function. While some of his biological theories have been corrected by modern science, his systematic approach and his ability to observe the natural world with precision were fundamental to the development of biology as a science. Aristotelian physics. In the field of physics, Aristotle proposed a system based on the direct observation of natural phenomena, though many of his ideas were later refuted. His cosmology, for instance, described a geocentric universe, with the Earth at the center and celestial bodies revolving around it in perfect spheres. This model was accepted for centuries until it was replaced by the heliocentrism of Copernicus and Galileo in the 16th century. Aristotle also divided the world into two realms: the sublunary world, where the laws of physics are imperfect, and change is constant, and the superlunary world, where everything is perfect and unchanging. He believed that the movement of celestial bodies was eternal and circular, while movement on Earth was finite and linear. Moreover, Aristotle introduced the idea of the four elements: earth, water, air, and fire, as the fundamental components of everything in the sublunary world. Although many of his physical theories were wrong from the perspective of modern science, his observation-based approach and rational explanation of phenomena were pioneering. Aristotelian physics dominated Western thought for over 1,000 years and provided the conceptual framework that guided scientific inquiry in the Middle Ages. Poetics, theory of art and tragedy. In his work Poetics, Aristotle offered one of the first systematic theories of art, focusing especially on Greek tragedy. Aristotle defined tragedy as the imitation of a noble and complete action, which, through the representation of dramatic events, provokes a catharsis in the audience, purging them of emotions like fear and pity. For Aristotle, the key to a good tragedy is the structure of the plot. It must have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and all elements should be organized coherently to maintain the unity of action. The concept of catharsis has been the subject of numerous philosophical and literary debates, but for Aristotle, it represented an emotional process in which the audience experiences and releases their own emotions through identification with the characters in the story. Aristotle also defined the essential elements of tragedy: the myth, the plot, character, the people in the story, thought, the themes and messages, diction, the use of language, melody, the musical aspect, and spectacle, the visual elements. Although his analysis focused on tragedy, Aristotle believed that all forms of art imitate reality in some way, and his influence on art theory has been lasting, from the Renaissance to contemporary theory. The influence of Aristotle in the Middle Ages. Aristotle's philosophy was rediscovered and elaborated upon in the Middle Ages, especially through the works of Islamic thinkers such as Avicenna and Averroes. These philosophers translated Aristotle's works into Arabic and integrated them into their own philosophical and theological systems. The transmission of Aristotelian thought to the Islamic world was key to its later reintroduction into Europe. In the 13th century, Aristotle's philosophy became a central part of Christian theology through the work of Thomas Aquinas, who sought to synthesize Aristotelian thought with Christian doctrine. Aquinas, who was later canonized as a saint, was one of the leading proponents of scholastic philosophy, a movement that used Aristotelian logic and reasoning to address theological questions. Aquinas' Summa Theologica is one of the most representative examples of this synthesis between reason and faith, based on Aristotle's philosophy. The decline of Aristotelianism and its impact on modern science. Despite the preeminence of Aristotelian thought during the Middle Ages, the advancement of science in the 16th and 17th centuries led to the refutation of many of Aristotle's theories, particularly in the fields of physics and astronomy. With the work of Copernicus, Galileo, and Newton, the geocentric model in Aristotle's physics were replaced by heliocentrism and the laws of modern mechanics. However, while his influence in physics waned, Aristotle's legacy in philosophy and science endured. His insistence on empirical observation and the use of logic as fundamental tools for knowledge inspired modern thinkers such as Francis Bacon and René Descartes, who, although critical of Aristotelianism, were influenced by his method. In fact, The scientific method as we understand it today has its roots in Aristotle's approach to investigation and classification of knowledge, Aristotle's legacy in contemporary philosophy. In recent centuries, Aristotle has remained a central figure in philosophy. His ethics of virtue was revived in the 20th century by philosophers such as Alasdair MacIntyre, who, in his work After Virtue, argued that modern ethics has lost sight of the fundamental questions of the good life and human flourishing, as Aristotle had framed them. Aristotelian virtue ethics has gained ground in contemporary debates, in contrast to deontological or utilitarian ethics that dominated moral philosophy in the 18th and 19th centuries. Moreover, his political theory remains relevant in discussions about the role of the state and community in human life. In a context where democracies face challenges related to social cohesion and justice, Aristotle's idea of the common good and the importance of the middle class as stabilizers of the political system continues to be a topic of study. The philosophy of Aristotle is one of the most vast and complex systems in the history of Western thought. Through his work in logic, metaphysics, ethics, politics, biology, and physics, Aristotle established a systematic approach to knowledge that influenced philosophy, science, and theology for over 2 millennia. Unlike his teacher Plato, Aristotle believed that knowledge should be based on empirical observation and experience of the material world. While many of his theories have been superseded by scientific advances, the method and spirit of his inquiry remain a model for the pursuit of knowledge. Aristotle not only provided a theoretical framework for understanding reality, but he also laid the foundations for entire disciplines that are still influenced by his thought. His virtue ethics, which promotes balance and human flourishing, remains relevant in contemporary philosophical discussions about morality and the good life. His influence in politics, biology, and art theory also continues to be a subject of study and reflection in contemporary philosophy. Aristotle, who lived in the 4th century before Christ, not only witnessed an era of intellectual splendor in ancient Greece but also helped shape human thought in a way that resonates to this day. Thus, his legacy is not only a historical matter but a living and evolving subject in today's philosophy and science.